You know, most people get a free day and immediately ruin it. They don't really relax. They almost panic. They fill the silence with a list of things to do that nobody even really asked for. Free time feels like uncomfortable instead of good. And it's almost like we treat rest that it should be something that you have to earn first. It's got to be a reward after. You know, a day with no plans feels like a threat instead of a gift. And it's almost like I would say we don't even know what to do with empty space anymore. I think we're so caught up in the system, it just almost gets to the point it feels unnatural. Everybody's clamoring away for your attention. Every moment, every second's got to be filled. It's not that you're lazy, you're just allergic to stillness. You know, and when stillness is, has been treated as something that should be almost feeling uncomfortable, it's almost like that stillness has been trained right out of our system. We were kind of taught rest has to be justified somehow. It's got to be really earned. Let me ask you a question. Let me know honestly. Put that in the comments. Do you ever feel like when you're doing nothing, it feels like you're kind of falling behind? It's almost like we kind of use productive, being productive is the only way we can measure if we had a good day or not, or a successful day. And that's another question. How many of you really actually feel that being productive is equal to being successful? How much do we ride on that essence that it's the only way to be successful? We've got to produce, got to be productive. Every minute's got to be accounted for. And sitting still almost brings up a guilt instead of a relief. We almost feel like, okay, something's missing. I'm falling behind. I feel guilty. Do I deserve this time? Do I deserve this moment? One could argue nobody's even showed us how to actually slow down. Or we've just been trained right out of it. We used to know, but we don't even know what that feels like anymore because of that slowly just creeping up, busier and busier. Part of that, I think, is financially as well. We're always having to keep ahead, so much more difficult. We often hear about people saying, like it in the good old days, it was all different back in the good old days. I think it's a lot to do with the fact we just want to feel relaxed. We want to feel like we can have room to breathe again. We reference that to the good old days being simpler, but I think it's something that we've missed in the sense, why can't we do that now? Why can't we have a simpler way? Why are we such forced into every moment that when we truly slow down, you feel guilty? So kind of like in this video, I kind of want to show you two versions of the same day. And I've gotten a very good perspective of this because I'd literally spent half my life in two different countries, two different environments. Totally two different setups. One is 6 months in Canada and the other one's 6 months in the Philippines. Now, it's definitely the same person, me. I have more or less the same routines. It's just a completely different pace. And that contrast says more than any explanation ever could. And this is something I'm very much able to observe, and I'm wanting to share this. It's not even really about the country. And it's about what each day allows you to do in the different environments. This split has taught me more about myself than actually anything else. And it didn't happen right off the bat. It took a while to really analyze and compare them on a consistently basis. Every time I go back and forth, it's like a new culture shock almost every time. And I really had a long time trying to figure out what I would call it. I would literally call it almost an energy, a vibe, different levels between, in my case, particularly Canada and then the Philippines. And it let me really compare the differences and the essence of how life is being lived. And it's not always necessarily about the money, because as most people know, the Philippines is a developing country. It's very difficult there. There's a lot of people that are much more poor, and they're still busy as well, but it's a whole different aspect, and it's a different environment and how they handle everything and what makes everybody seems to be more internally happy. My days used to look like pretty much always the same. You wake up at sort of the same time, you have your morning routine, you definitely got your errands, you've got your jobs, you've got your things to get ready for food. A lot of pressure's on. Every hour, you had a job to do. You have something on the checklist, and heaven forbid something, and especially in the morning, if something just gets thrown off kilter a little bit, you right to anticipate the day is going to be much more difficult right off the bat on a simple little thing. Traffic might be a little bit different. The stoplight might be construction on the road. Everything it's very time consuming and very there's an underwriting pressure. And when everything's going smoothly, it very much so looks always impressive from the outside. Yes, you feel that accomplishment. You felt like you actually have control at first anyway. You feel like everything's going in a precise order that you need it to be. But at some point, it actually stops feeling like a choice. And it just feels more into the routine. And it actually starts slipping more into the sense of like this routine better be kept up. And more importantly, it actually gets to a point like, wait a minute, I don't have a moment to breathe. I don't have really a moment to relax, because this thing that I've just created is demanding my time every moment. And pretty soon it becomes like it's not a schedule anymore. It's a cage, it's a trap, it's an environment that I've built for myself. I don't know if any of you can actually relate to something like this. I sure would like to hear it. It can't be just me. And I would actually think that a lot of us build this structure in a way to feel safe. You know, we feel like this is what we have to do to, that we see everybody else going that direction. We see that this must be the path. This is the normal path. Quite often, it's almost like that schedule protected me from sitting, still with myself. And that's not a good form of protection. I would even go as far as saying busy became a way to avoid feeling anything. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that particular statement, but it really almost numbs you out when you just have that. You've got nothing else to focus on. You don't have, you've got no other direction. It's literally just keeping all your attention on going forward. Don't fall behind. Stay busy. It's almost like you can't tell the difference between discipline and avoidance. At some point, the cage actually almost feels comfortable because, you build it for yourself. Everybody does. You've got your routine and it's custom built. So you actually think, and it's an illusion of comfort. You actually feel that this is my safety zone. This is my comfortable habit. This is what I'm supposed to be. This is exactly going on. And, this is what's going to get me further ahead. Can't say nobody forced me on this. Of course, I chose it. And that makes it not much more painful when I start realizing that and that difference. Now that I look back on it, quite often I think, the busier I was, the less I actually got done that actually mattered to me, that had essence, that had value. It seems like a lot less of those things were being accomplished, and the busier and busier I got doing this, it felt like more was missing, more was slipping away. And this is another thing I really kind of want to focus on as well and say, most of those hours are filled with like a noise and not really not being progressive. And, when you're inside of that noise, you don't hear that noise. You don't get to feel it. You don't feel that draining energy and that energy vibe difference when you're actually in that system. It's very difficult to hear that. It's very easy to get caught up in that confused, that movement is the same as, something that's driving you properly in the form of success. There's a difference of types of exhausted. Like being exhausted felt like proof I was doing something right. But, there's a difference of those two exhaustions. You go out and grab a shovel and you're doing something in the backyard or whatever, physically labor hard, and that's a different kind. But and those seem to be less and less nowadays, and it actually feels more rewarding sometimes, that physical type of work. Yes, you get a good meal in, you get a good sleep, you do feel like you accomplished something very successful. But I would argue, and again, correct me where I'm wrong, what you think about this, but I think a lot of our exhaustion is not physical. It's more definitely about mental. And we feel like, again, even though that, we've got this checklist during the day, we got this done, get this done, we're feeling like that's accomplishment. And we feel like that being that tired of doing all of this kind of stuff, it almost feels like that is the proof we needed. That's the self-rewarding loop that we're in. And then quite often it feels like the important things that are truly important keep getting pushed to a later date, because those truly important things are almost like, well, you know what, haven't quite earned them yet, not quite ready for that. This is not pushing. We've got to push through this first. We got to keep this system going. It's almost like I was reacting to the schedule instead of, living my life. Everything about the schedule, you got to maintain. And I don't want to over dramatize it in the sense of like, if you got this checklist, but you do have this mental checklist. You always think, okay, I've got to continue doing this, get my routine going, get the work going in, doing all of these things, because in the future, it's always about the future. You're thinking this will lead to something. But how do we stop and realize what is it leading to? How often is the goalpost being moved? I've said this so often. I always feel like the goalpost gets moved, becomes more of the chase than anything else. Being busy and being meaningful turned out to, definitely being two different things. but it all gets blended into together when you're feeling that busy. And what I've just basically went over and described is what I felt is I spent decades in this particular system. That's my North American system, and that I felt again, like I felt like that all this is normal. And I felt, okay, and things were going pretty good. I really can't say I'm complaining. There was a lot of, you got decent income, you're doing your thing and stuff like that. But it always felt like it started squeezing tighter. And then come the contrast. Here now I'm spending literally half my life in a different country, different culture, different environment, different way of looking at things, different way of movement. Now I'm not necessarily waking up to an alarm. There's no app, just the sun deciding when I move, where I move, and what I want to do. Now when I wake up, my body feels a lot more like awake and alert. In a way that I'm meaning is it's more prepared for the moment. I don't really need an app or somebody telling me what's next to do. I don't have to look at the phone for the schedule. And I'll be quite honest, it's a hard habit to put down. It's like I'm still reaching for it and thinking, okay, what do I got to do? And then I'm realizing, okay, what am I looking at? The morning starts slow, not rushed. This is so important. Right off the bat, I'm able to have that restful, not jump out of bed and, okay, away I go. And that's when I started noticing, like everybody can tell right away the heat, the different environment and the sunshine and the different noises. Of course, those are all going to be very right away, hitting you. But when you start noticing a little bit more on a subtle basis, like you're actually absorbing them and you start to really feel, hey, wait a minute, this is something different. This is, for lack of better words, it's almost like uncomfortable at first. It really is. It's almost like unsettling because it's so completely different. Nothing was demanding my attention. And again, I make that really clear because quite often I still grab the phone and I'm thinking, okay, well, why do I have this? It's almost automatic reflex. And when you get to have that moment of nothing's demanding your attention before you get out of bed, it begins to start feeling like the day starts on my terms. This is huge. And what I've noticed here in the Philippines, and I would imagine a lot of other countries and areas you can find this as well, but nobody's really impressed by how busy you are. In fact, I would almost argue it's quite the opposite. A simple walk to the market replaces a grocery run. I know they're both, in essence, the same thing, but there's such a difference in that feeling when you're actually just going to the market versus a grocery mandatory run. Now, they're both mandatory, both need food, but they are both on such a different level. And even though I'm buying food for the day instead of the week, so you would think, okay, that's not time management properly, get it over with it all at once. It feels much more rewarding. This time doesn't feel, even though I'm going more or less on a daily basis, those are things I start to enjoy. And for another reason as well, just the proper health of the food is much more fresh and it's much more rewarding to get on that as well. But what I want to stress here, the difference between buying food for a week, you've got your checklist, you've got your list, you've got an instant schedule. When you're buying it for the day, you're kind of browsing around looking, you're talking with the vendors instead of rushing through a list. You're able to see the food, see what kind of selection you have for that day, what's fresh, what you have a new idea. Like I think, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to have this. I haven't had this in a while, something like that. And again, it lets you allow living your life instead of living a schedule. In the afternoon, heat does help. It really does slow everyone down. Not just me, but it does slow it down. That's another, it almost forces me. A lot of the stuff I was forced into, not this particular shopping stuff, but what I'm getting at is a lot of these stuff opened my eyes in a different perspective. People rest in the middle of the day here in the Philippines, often have a nap, and I never, ever had naps. And I'm starting to learn the value in that. And even just 10, 15 minutes, it's huge. And it's actually, quite honestly, there's a lot of studies on how healthy that is. But what I've really noticed is, like, if this was back home now in comparison, having a nap or resting in the middle of the day, especially without apologizing for it or feeling guilty and having that burden of like, okay, this is uncomfortable, where this is perfectly normal. What a contrast. What to be able to see the difference and the value in that is tremendous. Busy is not a status symbol here. Not the way it is like back home. Huge difference. No comparison. The schedule wasn't keeping me safe. It was keeping me distracted from how I actually felt. And that's something to really sit with for a moment and really think about it, because when you're distracted from how you actually feel inside, there's something that you can only bottle that up for so long. And the difference really is never really about where I'm living, because you can create your own environment wherever you are. But one environment gave me permission to slow down. The other one truly didn't. And I would even argue because I've got the opportunity of going back and forth on a regular, I've been doing this for several years now, back and forth, half my life there, half my life here. And it's really given me that deeper perspective. And I will say that even though I'm understanding the value when I am in the Philippines, for example, and I come back, and I always tell myself, okay, don't get caught up in it. Don't get caught up in it. I don't need to. It slowly creeps in. It's the whole energy vibe here that's such a difference. It's such a hard thing to explain, but you can really see it and feel it start changing you. And I really would say, you start using structure to avoid sitting with my own thoughts. And that is not healthy in the long run, for sure. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to run to the Philippines. I'm not saying the Philippines fixed me. What it did allow me to do, it stopped and it let me, it stopped letting me hide from myself. And this is, I think many people feel that, and they don't really know how to explain it when they go to these places like this. Of course, the cost of living is much cheaper. And by the way, if any of this stuff is resonating with you, please follow along, because I'll be sharing how I make all of these things happen, how I can actually make them happen with a low budget and still feel like I've got much more. This is what I want to share. This is the whole point of my channel and stuff like that. But like I was saying, and I'm not saying everyone needs to run away and the Philippines is going to be the magic cure. It can be if you allow it to be. This is the big difference, though. You have to allow things to happen to you. And you definitely have to be open-minded. And this wasn't easy. I've made several mistakes, and I'll be sharing them. And if you got any questions what my mistakes were, leave them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to share them, because they're very important to share. Because it took me a while. This is not something I learned just the second I got there. It actually had to be banged into my head a few times. And I really had to appreciate the value between the two. And then without the schedule, feelings I'd kind of buried for the longest time started showing up. And it's like, wait a minute, this is more like it. This is what I'm missing. This is what I should be about. This is what life's about. And I'll be really honest, it was quite uncomfortable at first. It's something that it was my pride, my ego that got in the way of a lot of it, and probably still is too many times now. But what I'm getting is the reason why I felt uncomfortable, because I always thought I was in complete control. I thought I was the master of my domain. And I was like, this was all normal, this rat race, for lack of better words, or this scheduling that I spent decades creating, this cage that I built for myself, I felt like was all this, well, who can I blame besides myself? So of course it felt uncomfortable. But then, I realized there's a relief feeling at the same time. Having a full calendar checklist is not the same thing as having a full life. You can be definitely busy every hour, every minute, have everything as, attention grabbing and all this kind of stuff. And you can just be go, and you can still feel empty. And even if you don't feel that emptiness right off the bat, there's something empty inside that starts trying to bubble through and give you warning signs, either through physical things in your body or eventually emotional. And definitely, I've said this before, being productive is not the same thing as having meaning. And when you keep that busy, so busy, I think we actually lose focus on what meaning is and what is our meaning. Everybody has a different angle on it. And a packed schedule, it can really be its own kind of avoidance. You can create this so you don't deal with things. People do it with different things. Like, people always say, if you've got sarcasm, you're hiding certain things, but I'm not trying to be a philosopher, but I really do believe in a lot of this. A packed schedule, it really can be, your own form of avoidance. You're not dealing with things on hand for the moment. My goal was never to fill every hour. I don't think anybody's goal is really to, I'm going to fill every hour and be that productive. I think our goal is to have time. I think our goal is to buy back our time. I made another video particularly on that. Our goal is always about retirement, or we're reaching some point at the top of the ladder. Our goal is always somewhere ahead in the future. That's our goal. And maybe we should stop for a moment and realize a full life has space in it, has emptiness to sit in and observe. And by having those moments to sit in and observe, you can actually find out what's more important for you. Every individual is going to have their own. I'm not here to tell you what you need to make your life happy. But I think what I am saying is, I think most people are so busy they don't even know how to ask that question. Or more importantly, they feel like they know that question because it's just a matter of time. They're going to stumble onto it. They're on their path. They're hey, wait a minute, I've got everything scheduled. Of course I'm on the right path. But like I said, I think a full fulfillment life has space in it, not just tasks, not just a check mark, not just a consistently going forward. And in many ways, I had to unlearn what a good day was, what it was supposed to be like, what it was supposed to feel like, you know. And like I said in the beginning, I felt a little uncomfortable with sitting with that. It was like, because I felt like, hey, wait a minute, I've wasted decades, I've wasted a lot of time. And again, my ego was in the way because I had to admit I was wrong, or I was at least looking at it the wrong way. And that's a hard pill to swallow. And I would say, it's not that you need more hours in your day. Definitely not. I would say you need permission to stop filling them, to stop cramming every little moment full, to feel that is success. Having more time is never really actually the problem. Is what I did with that, every empty moment, with what I did with that time, what my mind was active like, how did I allow even my mind to rest? We're talking not just physical, but your mind is from the next A, B, C, what's next? And this I got to really emphasize, it was, again, I have to call myself extremely stubborn, and because giving permission to stop is harder, giving permission to stop yourself from overthinking and actually stopping and enjoying the moment, allowing yourself that permission without the guilt feeling is definitely harder than most people think. Stillness, 100%, does not equal laziness. It's where the actual noticing of life happens. It's where actually the feelings, true feelings, can start to surface. And you can start really seeing what is more important, what truly holds value. And I'm definitely not saying this is about doing less, but it is about doing less performing. When you could start seeing the version of a day that felt the slowest, ended up feeling the most fullest, then you got to ask yourself, okay, wait a minute, I got to reanalyze everything. That's an important thing to start looking at. And I'm kind of curious, have you ever had those days where you did the least, but they felt like they're the most fulfilling? Let me know, because this is something that when you get to those things and you actually are able to analyze them properly, they're very powerful. And I think most people just shrug them off and they get right back on that wheel and that checklist. They thought, okay, this was great, and they move forward without realizing how much of that is valuable. So I just want to say, you know what? Take a moment and give yourself permission to just step aside from the wheel of the rat race for a moment. Give yourself permission to be still. Put the phone away. Put it down. Turn off the TV. Don't listen to the news. Ironically, you're right now listening to YouTube on this, but my point being is just give yourself permission to slow down and let whatever feelings come forward and deal with them. My way of living is, I wouldn't even call it being a minimalist or getting rid of everything or, being lazy. And it definitely comes with age, I suppose, too. What you hold valuable. But I do want to say that it is a lot easier than you think it can be. And by all means, if anything resonates with you, please share, please follow, like, etc. Of course, it really does make me feel motivated to do more videos. But I'm also, if this, like I said, this resonates with you, I'll be doing more stuff, how I changed my life from going to a different country, what it's taught me. I'll be also sharing, if you're ever interested in how to afford to do these kind of things, it is a lot easier than you may think. You can live on a lot less and have a lot more. And I think that's at the end of the day. We're all fighting for our freedom in the sense of having happiness. That's what freedom is, just being completely happy and enjoying the moment. And that's what I'm all about. That's what I'm trying to share and give you different perspectives. Anyway, thanks for following along and being here, and we'll catch you in the next one. Everybody take care. Thank you very much.